Okay, well, here we are back to part two for interval notation, finishing up chapter 3-6. And we just finished talking about infinity and the symbols of the brackets and parentheses. So we put your dotted line down and write down this example right here. It says graph and write interval notation for 1 is less than x is less than or equal to -5. Okay, once that's down, let me talk you through it over here on the right hand side. Okay, the first thing that you would want to do here, since you have this is we learned that this is an and inequality. So what we would do first is we would want to graph 1 is less than x. All right, so let's do that, because it asks you to do two things. It asks you to graph, and then it asks you to write interval notation. So you've got this number line. Your boundaries are 1 and 5. So if 1 is less than x, okay, well that's an open circle, right? We don't include that. And that would represent all numbers on this side of 1, right? Because 1 is less than x. Remember, you think about what 1 is less than what number? Well, 1 is less than 2, is less than 3, so it's these numbers, this direction. And then the other is that x is less than or equal to 5. That's a solid circle going this way. So this is an and compound inequality that we'd learned previously. And what we have here is an and inequality, and then it asks for, so I kind of messed up over here. So we graph that with an open circle that way, and then you would graph x is less than or equal to 5, which was a closed circle this way. All right, now consider this, that the interval does not include 1. So that's going to be a parenthesis going this way because it's the left boundary right there. And then it does include 5. So that's going to be a bracket going this way because that's the upper boundary here, or lower boundary, upper boundary. Okay, so interval notation would look like this: parenthesis 1, comma 5, bracket. That represents, didn't mean to do that. That represents the same thing that this graph represents here. These two things are the same, basically. Okay, and this interval notation is actually quite handy for us when you get into some of the higher math classes to summarize quickly a set or a certain set that might have boundaries like this or have infinite solutions that go to the right or the left. Okay, do a dotted line there, and let's look at a couple more and see if we can wrap this up in one video. I'd sure like to be able to do that for you. Next page, it just says this, graph, and I'm going to add to this, graph and write as an inequality. And notice what they've done. They've given you just the interval notation, and they're asking you to create the graph and the inequality. Well, first of all, this means to include -4. All right, so I think it's easiest to do the graph first. So that means at 4, you have a solid circle. Oh, sorry, -4. I almost made a mistake there. Xander could have got me, but no. Solid circle right there at 4. -4, did it again. -4, there's a solid circle. Okay, so you include that. Now the 6 parenthesis means an open circle, because we do not include that solution right there. Okay, so you have basically this set of numbers, okay, going this direction. Okay, so if you haven't figured this out, the number on the left represents the lower boundary, and the numbers on the right represents the upper boundary there. So if you're going to write this as an inequality, -4 is the lower boundary less than or equal to x less than 6, right there. And you've got it. Okay, so you just did this question, which we'll be doing that when you come back to school. All right, let's go to the next example. I think this is the last one I need to talk through with you, just so I can say you've seen it all. All right, and that is this. Write the graph and interval notation for this OR inequality, this compound inequality, x is less than or equal to -1 or x is greater than 2. Okay? Well, let's graph x less than or equal to -1. Well, I know that's a closed circle, so let's draw a number line here. It's a closed circle, all right, and it's going to the left because numbers less than -1 would include numbers like -2, -3, -4, -5. Get my point? Okay, numbers going this way. All right, then graph x is greater than 2 with an open circle going that way. All right, open circle. Arrow right there. So there's the graph. That was the first thing, but they asked me also to write the interval notation. So we'll do that here. That's a closed circle at -1. Okay, but honestly, the closed circle doesn't really matter because you know what? We're going from -infinity to -1, close bracket, or, now remember, these represent all the possible solutions that x could be. If I've lost you for a minute, all they've done is taken an OR inequality, an OR compound inequality, and there's like two parts to the boundary. One of them goes to -infinity. It stops at 1 and includes 1, so we have to have the bracket there, or parenthesis 2, comma, infinity. And again, with the infinity, we do the parenthesis. Okay, so that is interval notation for this OR inequality. So there you have it. A whole bunch of information within 2 videos. Not too bad. So take a minute, review what you need to if it's confusing to you, and hopefully life will be good for you. Goodbye.